Hello everyone, my name is Dania Putra Siska. So here I will tell you guys about the psychological process of stereotyping. So before we get into our discussions, I will tell you guys a short definitions. So there are core definition and social impact. So stereotyping is an inherent human cognitive mechanism. It is not necessarily malicious by nature. Rather, it stems from a fundamental cognitive need to simplify, categorize, and efficiently process an overwhelmingly complex social world. And the social impact is, although it begins as a cognitive shortcut, it acts as a dangerous foundation or precondition for social bias, prejudice, and systematic discrimination. The journal notes that in times of global crisis, the resulting exclusion and hostility can severely destabilize political and social structures. Okay, after the short definitions, we will get to our first topic, our first material. So the first material is the forming of social stereotypes, knowledge, proximity, and moral values. So, stereotype formation is dynamic and influenced by physical proximity, individual beliefs about human nature, cultural differences, and a global event. And the first point, there are 4 points of the first topic. The first one is psychological distance. Individuals are more likely to hold negative stereotypes. So, for the explanation, a study by Caldas in Brazil looked at how people perceive juvenile delinquents. They compared the views of everyday passers-by in a public square to workers inside juvenile justice courts. So the people who are socially or physically distant from the target group hold significantly harsher, more negative stereotypes because court workers interact with these youth closely. Their proximity reduces negative stereotyping. The second point is malleability. So the explanation, Pascuch and Oros conducted a study in Hungary focusing on refugees and migrants. An individual's personal belief system dictates their prejudice. People who believe that human traits and groups are malleable or capable of changing and adapting are far less likely to dehumanize migrants or view them as an existential threat. The third point is trait beliefs, or the kids these days, or KTD effect. So, Roscoe and Schooler examine why older generations constantly look down on younger generations. This effect is driven by individuals' rigid beliefs regarding how specific personality traits naturally change over a human lifespan. So, if someone thinks a trait declines across generations, they project that bias onto today's shop. Okay, the fourth point is moral cues and gender stereotypes. Lai researched how physical and social cues alter the perception of women in China. Chinese women displayed sexually attractive cues were heavily stereotyped as having lower moral values and lower overall humanism compared to women displaying beautiful facial cues and virtuous behavioral cues. This stereotype directly penalized them by lowering their perceived long-term mating value. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about culture and global context. There are 2 points. The first point is it's kind of hard to pronounce. Confucianism influence. In contrast to traditional Western models, Confucian cultures often view high-power individuals as possessing both high competence and high warmth due to expectation of social responsibility. So, for the explanations, traditional Western psychological models state that individuals in high-power positions are viewed as highly competent but cold or low in warmth. Lee Liam tested this culture shaped by Confucianism. In Confucian cultures, senior high-power individuals are stereotyped as possessing both high competence and high warmth. This occurs because these cultures structurally expect powerful figures to hold immense social responsibility and show genuine concern for the well-being of others. The second point is COVID stigma. Okay, so we all know about COVID-19, right? No. Global threats completely reshape cultural biases. So the first finding is, the finding in USA, it's Delhi, found that as public rhetoric increasingly blamed China for the pandemic, it triggered a surge in stereotyping Asian Americans as permanent foreigners, exposing them to heightened social hostility. But the finding COVID-19 in China, conversely, Zhou found that negative COVID-19 stereotypes were quite low in China, demonstrating that the more objective factual knowledge individuals possess about the virus, the fewer negative stereotypes they reported. Okay, we're going to our second material. Okay, so our second material is consequences of negative stereotypes. So let's get into our discussion. So on our second material, we will talk about legal policies, spatial exclusion, discriminations, internalization, self-harm, and gender self-stereotyping. So legal policy or lawmaking. Because psychological distance breeds negative stereotypes against juvenile transgressors, it directly shapes public policy opinions. The study in Brazil proved that people holding these distant, negative stereotypes are far more likely to aggressively support lawmaking proposals to reduce the age of criminal convictions, pushing for minors to be tried as adults. The second point is spatial exclusion. So, when there is a person named Wen, investigated space-related stereotypes specifically associated with people living with HIV or AIDS. When people hold negative stereotypes toward the physical spaces and communities occupied by PLWHA, it triggers a strong sense of threat and poor community evaluations. This results in severe spatial exclusions where outsiders actively resist visiting or integrating into those community areas. Okay, the next to our third point is internalization or self-harm, discriminations. So when individuals suffering from mental illness internalize public stereotypes regarding their lack of warmth and competence, it triggers intense negative emotions. This internalized stigma directly result in significantly higher levels of active or passive self-harm compared to mentally healthy demographic. So our third point is internalizations and self-harm. So Gardner studied how vulnerable groups internalize the very biases weaponized against them. When individuals suffering from mental illness internalize public stereotypes regarding their lack of warmth and competence, it triggers intense negative emotions. This internalized stigma directly results in significantly higher levels of active or passive self-harm compared to mentally health demographics. Next, I forgot to explain the gender self-stereotyping. So there is a person named Lee tracked how college students conform to traditional gender stereotypes. For male students, conforming to gender self-stereotyping actually correlated with higher personal self-esteem and elevated life satisfaction. However, this protective psychological caution did not hold true for women. meaning gender stereotyping does not offer them the same mental health benefits. Okay, so we will get into our third material. The title of our third material is Neurocognitive Mechanism, Brain Networks and Functional Response. So I will explain to you guys the whole brain network. So Wu and Zhao moved past broad social concepts to look at the microscopic physical brain. They mapped math-related stereotypes among female university students using resting state functional magnetic resonance imaging, or RSF MRI, degree centrally, or RSDC, and a graph theory network analysis. So the finding is stereotyping does not light up an isolated prejudice node in the brain. Instead, it alters the operational connectivity of holistic, widespread brain network. So there are 2 points of our third material. The first one is left hippocampus and posterior parietal region. So the hippocampus is heavily tied to memory and learning. Under the weight of negative stereotype activation, the degree centrality of the left hippocampus distinctly decreases, marking a direct neurological impairment caused by stereotype-related stress. And for it's hard to pronounce, we will just call it PPC. So PPC activation, the PPC is deeply involved in how we process self-relevance and identity. When exposed to stereotypes, the degree centrality of PPC drastically increases. This physical spike reflects the intense taxic mental processing that occurs as the brain tries to grapple with external social labels being forced upon it. Okay, that's all for our third material. We will continue to our fourth or last material. So here is our fourth or our last material. The title of the fourth material is Interventions and Policy Making, Reducing Negative Stereotyped Consequences. Let's get into our fourth discussions. So there are 2 points of the fourth material. The first one is intergenerational contact and cognitive training. So there is a person named Long designed an intervention to dismantle age-related stereotypes held by younger generations. Actual physical contact with older adults effectively smashes negative biases. Remarkably, the study found that even just imagining positive contact with elderly individuals successfully reduced ageist stereotypes and vastly increased empathy and perspective taking among young adults. The second point is cognitive training, single versus multiple sessions. So Chen used the implicit association test, or IAT, framework to see how we can train the brain out of aging stereotypes in young teens from 12 to 13 years old. They compared a single training session against repeated sessions. So a single isolated bias training session provides incredibly brief, short-lived benefits. To make a real lasting impact, interventions must utilize multiple training sessions paired with varied, diverse tasks. This repetition is structurally required to significantly prolong and cement the positive anti-stereotype interventions effect over time. So that's all that I can tell you guys about the psychological of stereotyping. I'm so sorry if there are lots of something that is wrong, and I'm Dania. See you next time.